Hello and welcome in. I am Greg Smith, recruiting extraordinaire for Hail Varsity, and I'm joined once again for our Football Thursday video of the week by Steve Marik, staff writer, also of Hail Varsity. Steve, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. It's a little wet outside. We got to get our weather report in. It's been really wet for the past 2 days. I won't get into what my rain gauge said because I don't know if people are going to be interested in that, but excited to talk some football with you today, Greg.
Yeah, me too. But I mean, listen, a lot of people watching this, like it's that time of year where, you got to get some water out on the lawn, right? You're doing the yard work. Hopefully you got it in and you were not like me and you got it in before all of this rain started. I did like layer one of everything. Like didn't first mow in the backyard and all that, trying to get that together. But then I waited. Now it looks like a jungle back there, but that's okay. We'll get it together. It'll all be nice. But we are not here to talk about my lawn. We are here to talk football, specifically something that we've heard a lot around Nebraska football right now from fans about the offensive line. So Nebraska has been on an absolute tear when it comes to the transfer portal and additions, right? There's 15 transfer additions that have happened this season from the portal. And then the last few, you've had a couple of guys on defense. And then the latest one, Marcus Washington, Texas wide receiver transfer, also from St. Louis. I feel like I always have to mention that when I'm talking about him, because that is an important, very important part of this story for Nebraska to get. I think their first player from St. Louis since Trey Bryant in the 2015 recruiting class, wow. I believe.
That's a name.
Yeah, and that's a name. That is a blast from the past, right? Man, that's for me one of those great what if stories in recent years too, because man, he was really good before that knee injury. But so all of those players though that Nebraska has landed, none of them here in this recent run have been on the offensive line. So a common question that has come up, whether it's on Twitter, in the Facebook comments, you see this all the time, like, hey, great, we added another wide receiver, and that was probably needed to bolster that rotation, but where's the beef on the offensive line? So I guess, Steve, I want to start here. When you hear that, I guess, what's your first reaction? Do you agree, disagree? Like, what are your thoughts on where Nebraska is right now when it comes to adding people from the offensive line?
Yeah, so my first kind of thought that comes up with that is, so Nebraska did bring in 2 offensive linemen. They have just been here on the team for a while already, in Hunter Anthony, a tackle from Oklahoma State, and then Kevin Williams Jr., coming over from Northern Colorado, an FCS program. So and Kevin Williams Jr. is, I think, a guy who could end up pushing a starter or getting his way into a starting spot. I don't know where at. Maybe right guard is a spot that you could see Kevin Williams Jr. in. But boy, he's a big guy. He's a powerful guy. He's experienced. He's played college football. So when I hear that, I think so they have brought in 2 guys, but of course, if you look at everywhere across the line, you're kind of wondering about the center position with Cam Jurgens gone. Is Trent Hickson going to be that guy? Is he actually going to be the first team center in Ireland? Those are all things that kind of go through your mind, as well as the injury situation at tackle with Teddy Prohaska coming off what he's coming off, and then Turner Corcoran being extremely limited and not going through spring at tackle. If Turner Corcoran is healthy to go, I wrote a story earlier this year about how, talking with some guys, some former coaches back in Kansas, Free State High School, that know him in Lawrence, and they're saying that he's athletic enough that he can play many different spots, just different spots along the line. And Scott Frost even alluded to that too early this spring. So there's a lot of different options. You're just going to have to find like the correct ways to put them in there. And you need to go through spring, and it might not look what they're going to trot out on against Northwestern. It might not look, the same way going throughout the season, because I think there's just going to be a lot of mixing and matching and try to find your best 5 guys. And is that question, that riddle, going to be solved week 1 or week 0? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think one of the things too that I really think is at play with this whole thing, and why fans feel like, man, they just really haven't gone after the offensive line. I think it's a perception thing in part, right? One, I do think you're 100% correct about the timing of when the offensive linemen that have been added to the program got here. It feels like they're elder statesmen at this point, right? But it's only really been 4 or 5 months that they've been on campus. Maybe a little bit longer for Hunter Anthony, because he did seem to come pretty fast but to get to the team. But at the same time, though, we spent a lot of time talking about O'Shawn Mathis. We've talked about other defensive line players, skill position guys like that. The talk of all of those guys, and I think the perception that some of those guys are high impact players, right? And so you don't have that immediate name recognition of an offensive tackle that they're pursuing out of the portal. But I would also say, on the flip side of that, there aren't a ton of like huge names that have been in the portal on the offensive line anyway. And I think a couple of them, I'm blanking on the guy's name that went to LSU, that Trayvon Shorts, that he was a big name, but like there have been very few of those guys. And I do think that you're correct on the other point, that essentially what's happening here with Nebraska's offensive line is they're not going to be boosted necessarily by what they get from the portal. It's what they get back health-wise. And I think that we always kind of knew that in the back of our minds, but it's just really hard to wrap your arms around that as a fan right now and be like, okay, well, how healthy is Teddy? Is Turner going to come back healthy? And what position is he going to play? If he can play any number of positions, because then that starts kind of a domino effect. I'm really curious on what happens if he's not the center, if Trent Hickson holds that job down. He seems to have done well during the spring. He got some praise from all the coaches, right? If he holds that job down, I'm really interested on where Turner goes then. So then does he go back to right tackle, which I actually thought was his best position, has been his best position so far while he's been at Nebraska. But then if that happens, what happens to Bryce Benhart? And hopefully Teddy's healthy then to hold down that left tackle spot. There's just a lot of question marks on that offensive line. And oh, by the way, we've got a first year coach at the position as well. And so we don't really have a great bank of experience to pull from on what he likes to do either. And so it just all becomes kind of this mystery grab bag. And I think because of Nebraska's recent results, that makes it to where you just lean towards being concerned about it. I'm not saying don't be concerned or that Nebraska can't use a boost there, but we're just going to have to wait and see. It's a tough situation with the offensive line right now.
I'm right there with you. And I think, once the offseason started and a lot of these transfers started coming out, the thing that a lot of people said was, it was kind of like a cool little way of saying it was, this position goes like gold, in the transfer portal. And I think that's true with, would you say, defensive line and offensive linemen?
Yeah.
If you're a good defensive lineman and an offensive lineman and you enter the transfer portal, you're going to get taken. You're going to get some looks right away. So I think you're also kind of seeing it right now where, it's May 26th. Guys have had time to get into the portal, look around, take visits, and find a new school. There might not be a lot of quality options right now. You just don't want to bring in a body to bring in a body, right? It needs to be the right guy and the guy who could actually help you. So if there's not one in there that the coaching staff, deems as good enough to come here and compete, you don't need to go get him. That's where I'm coming from, I guess.
Yeah. And I can't say it enough. It's hard to also know what type of guy you need to bring into the room if you don't have a full grasp on what you have in the room already. Right. I feel with defensive line, even though Nebraska had all of those injuries and, they were down to just a 2 or 3 healthy scholarship defensive linemen at times during the spring, I feel like they still kind of knew, hey, and obviously they did, hey, we kind of need to go get somebody here, right? You saw that with kind of wide receiver, with Marcus Washington being added to the mix. And I think that it's a good Xavier Betts replacement if you want to think about it that way. And even Kane Williams, that gave you a real good signal of what Nebraska thought about the depth behind what potentially should be Buford and Farmer as your 2 starting safeties. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm not really sure how I feel about the depth there. Travis Fisher brings in another guy. It's really hard to know what's happening with that offensive line. And I wonder if you had a full spring of Teddy and Turner both being out there and you said, okay, this is what we think our 5 is going to be and what positions we're going to have them in. And we go through the whole spring and they either perform or don't. That I think would have given you even more kind of push to find someone in the portal. But you're right. You can't just add someone just to add someone. And I don't think you're seeing a lot of impact offensive linemen out there as it goes. Maybe that impact offensive lineman is, the young guy from Elkhorn South that you're hoping to get back from injury.
Yeah, for sure. And along with Teddy too is, man, that's got to be so tough. He's a good player. and everything. And he's an in-state guy that a lot of people are rooting for, I think. But I just would hope that a lot of people would temper their expectations because of what he went through with that injury. And for him to step onto the field, if he were to start against Northwestern, let's just not expect it to be absolutely perfect. And he's going to be an All-American tackle right away. Let's give him some time to shake the rust off. You know, it might not be pretty the first game, but yeah, I'm just really interested to see his progress and see what he looks like after that injury.
I feel that way about, I'm 100% with you, but I also feel that way about the whole line. Like, and one of the things that I think will be really interesting about this season, especially if they can figure out a way to kind of make it work and pick up some wins early in the season, is game 1 to game like 5, 6, 7. Where does the offensive line go from game 1 to game 5, 6, 7? Because I think that if you have the right coach, and Frost thinks that he does, and Donovan Raiola, and you've got some guys that you really feel good about, and those guys start to work back in, and they're getting better as the season goes along. Like, can Nebraska become one of those teams this season that has certain positions get better as they go along the season, right? I think that will be a really big key. You can't start like kind of at a 1 out of 10. You've got to start a little bit higher than that, because you're going to need to win a conference game in Ireland. But to see where they can kind of grow from the start. And I think that patience is going to be key with that offensive line. And I think that's what Frost, Raiola, and those guys are really banking on when it comes to not adding someone from the portal. I think that there are plenty of bodies there. I think they have 3 top 100 recruits that are on that offensive line. They've got talent and other high 3-star guys that had a lot of Power 5 offers, right? Like, there should be talent there to mold. Just got to bring it out of them.
Yeah, I forgot about Henry Lutovsky already. Like, he was a highly rated guy who had some really good offers for an offensive lineman. But yeah, he's another young guy. And I know, coaches want older guys on there and experienced guys, because usually the older ones are better. They're more stronger, they're more experienced and everything. And Henry's not an older guy. He's pretty young still. But yeah, there's just a lot of options on that offensive line that, Donovan Raiola is going to have to figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that'll be something that we're definitely talking about a lot once we get to fall camp, which will be here before we know it, because Nebraska plays that first game in Ireland on August 27th. But that'll do it for us this week. Now, make sure you guys are liking this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss a thing. You don't want to miss any of the great content we're bringing here, but you also want to make sure you just subscribe just to hailvarsity.com so you can get the magazine. We got the 2022 football yearbook coming up here soon. It'll be on newsstands and in your mailboxes before you know it. You want to make sure you get in time to be able to pick that up as well. We will catch you next time.